How's it going, guys? Welcome back to another GBA video. My name is Chris. Joining me again for his expert analysis and critique is the illustrious Adam of the Anaheim Mighty Ducklets for the D League. Adam, introduce yourself and tell people why we are here.
Well, hello. Thanks for having me back. We're here for actually a very big trade, really a giant mix-up that happened between the Pittsburg Steelixes, which is Joe, aka Swagliff, and the Arizona D-eoxys, which is Gubstacular. They traded legitimately half of their team to each other, which just was crazy.
Yeah, big move there that, in the off season, they only have seven pokes left as they're drafting three in the Mega this season. Out of seven Pokemon, they're trading three across the board there, which is pretty huge.
The good thing about this trade is that unlike the trade we talked about yesterday, there was no contract swap, so it was really a one for one, which made it pretty clean as far as that goes. And actually, when you look down the line of the Pokemon that were traded, it actually was a pretty even almost swap. But I guess we'll get into that here in a second. We'll probably also figure out who maybe got the better of the deal going on. But I guess we can start really with the 1 year contract swaps that we had down there if you like.
Yeah, so the trade started basically Joe saying, "Gubs, is there anything I can trade you for Heatran?" And Gubs had an idea for some stuff, but he didn't want to do a straight one for one Heatran for something. So some things got tacked on. Joe's actually been trying to get rid of Porygon since late last season. So it kind of worked out that in similar contract weeks and similar versatility and roles, they ended up trading Heatran for Porygon 2. So this was a really surprising trade for me because I didn't think Gubs would ever get rid of Heatran. I thought it was way too crucial and just institutionally part of his core of what the Deoxys was. I thought it was going to be a thing he was going to keep on that team as many years as he possibly could.
Yeah, it was really surprising to me too because he always talked about his Heatran Togekiss core that he had going on there, and to
Yeah, and then in the second season, Celatran between Celebi and Heatran was also a big
yeah.
thing. So
I mean, I will say at least for this part of the trade, Joe Swagliff really got the better end of the deal. Not only just from Pokemon speaking, because obviously you'd probably take Heatran over Porygon 2 9.5 times out of 10. But
yeah,
but also synergy wise, which we'll talk about in a little second. But Joe got a fire type to deal with his or give him that full
well, not
fire.
not just a fire type, but a fire steel type, which deals with Joe's two biggest multiple weaknesses across his team, which were flying and ice. Heatran is, a resist to both of those and great resist. Also gives him a fire immunity, which is wonderful. Um, and like I was saying, with Gubs having the Celebi Heatran core before, Joe does have Shaman, so it's essentially the exact same thing. Slightly different move pool, but obviously another base 100 grass psychic type across the board. So I think that's an amazing pickup. Gubs, on the other hand, picking up Porygon 2, another bulky normal type. So I guess he's going to run a normal core with Snorlax. Is that.
Yeah, that was something that I looked at and was I mean, unless he's gonna potentially try and trade Porygon or Snorlax at a later date, I didn't really understand that very much because they both pretty much fill the same role. I mean, obviously some people have run physical defensive Porygon too, but most of the time you're gonna see it as a special wall, and but to have that and Snorlax seemed a little redundant. I guess that maybe opens up the options to run something like a more often like for a curse lax or potentially a banded pursuit trap lax or something like that maybe. But I guess synergy wise, I didn't see how that really helped him out to get.
I mean, we have seen, from Nick later on in the season how valuable just the ability Trace can be
Very
on a single Pokemon. So, there is the utility of that. There is just the pure bulk and, more reliable recovery than Snorlax,
That's
honestly.
true, and with the support of Heal Bell from Celebi, it doesn't really have to worry too much about being Toxic War Down. Which I mean, there's only really two ways to wear down Porygon 2. That's with Toxic, and then knocking off the Eviolite and hoping that you can hit it with a strong or strong fighting move. Those are really the only two ways to take
Yeah.
down a Porygon 2. Um, but I don't know. I mean, it has three pretty actual useful abilities. Obviously, as you mentioned, Trace can be very niche and very useful when used properly. Adaptability, or not adaptability, it gets that's Porygon Z. It gets what analytic. Analytic can kind of be useful to hit kind of hard because it does have a base 105 special attack, which is no slouch.
No, not at
And then it
all.
also has the ability download, which again, kind of on that base 105 special attack, if you can get a +1 for free, you have a wall that can hit pretty hard. So I don't know. I don't really like this part. I would definitely say that Swag got
Yeah,
better.
I don't think Porygon 2 is a bad Pokemon by any means. I actually really liked it on Joe's team, and I thought it put in amazing amounts of work for him throughout the season. In a lot of ways, it was kind of an unsung hero of his team because, again, it was a Pokemon that was never going to get huge stats, and it was never running the fun niche sets that he would run with other
True.
things. But it played clutch roles, especially in the early part of the season. Wearing things down, taking out big threats and opening up opportunities for the things that were getting kills. But that said, just for Gub's team, I don't understand it. I don't get it. I think it was just a player to make some of the other trades that Gubs wanted to happen because they needed to have equitable things shifted to keep teams balanced.
Yeah, I mean before we move on real quick, I wanted to touch a little bit more on the Heatran side for Swagalith. I think it really fits in well. I mean it's two both teams have really four bulky mons on their team. I mean the Deoxys still have Celebi with the base 100s. Swagalith has Shaman with the base 100s. He has or Gupstacular has Togekiss and obviously P2 now and Snorlax, which are all supremely bulky. But then Joe over here has, like I said a little bit earlier, he has the grass, fire, water core of really bulky mons that can actually be very potent offensively also, in kind of contrast to what we saw yesterday when we were talking about Magnitude's team, who had the fire, water, grass core, but they were all more offensively oriented. You kind of see that a little bit in reverse over here on Joe's team.
Yeah, for Joe, it's definitely a somewhat more offense or defensive core. Obviously, you can run an offensive Heatran, obviously you can run an offensive Celebi, but just naturally inclined, those things tend to lean on the defensive side. So,
That's true, and I think it's interesting because Joe has three Mons with Heatran, Slowking, and Umbreon that could be really potent special walls, so that might open up the opportunity for the other two to potentially run more offensive
I
sets,
mean,
taking.
even Celebi, if it wants to, I tend to not want to run grass as a special wall too often, but it's still base 100 across the board.
True.
So,
Well, that's it's Shaman on his side, but
oh yeah,
yeah,
so
pretty much the same
yeah,
thing.
that's exactly why I messed those two up.
That's true. But anyways, I guess we can move on to. I'd like to jump actually up to the genies if we could, because I think this is where Gustacular got his money was worth of trading
Yeah,
away
this
Heatran.
is this is what Gubs wanted. Joe came at him. He said, "Is there anything I can trade you for Heatran?" Gubs' answer was Landorus Incarnate, or like that's what I want. That's the only thing on your team that is real supreme value for me. If you can trade me that, then we can talk. And Joe thought about it, and he was like, "Yeah, but we need to work out some extra things." So this was the get for Gubs. I think on paper it's a really good get.
I agree.
Landorus Incarnate's, so threatening, so scary. It's overshadowed a little bit by Therian form just because it's a little bit more versatile and more common in the standard Smogon meta, but it's still just incredibly good.
Yeah, it's really dangerous. I mean, it went what 12 kills and 8 deaths last
Yeah.
season. I mean, like it's a prolific Pokemon and offensive. But it is very versatile with its ability of sheer force that obviously basically makes it a flying Nidoking in that respect, where it can just no matter you slap a life orb on it and give it I don't know what sludge wave, and it doesn't even matter that it's not stab, it's still hitting supremely hard. And then it has some good boosting moves. Also, it gets access to Calm Mind. It gets access to Rock Polish. It's just a very good offensive mon. It has the good typing that the ground flying that has some pretty useful and then key resistances or immunities. So I think that definitely it makes Gubb's team that was once a little bit more bulky, now more offensive than he definitely has been in the past.
It's interesting. It's definitely part of Gubbs trying to reinvent his team. Obviously both of them trading away half their teams or reinventing their team regardless of intention, just by definition of volume that they traded. But this is definitely a shift for Gubbs, who up until this point was kind of one of the bulkier teams in the league every single season. His general strategy always seemed to be, get bulky things that can live, wear the other team down through attrition, and play it that way. And in my opinion, it worked really well
Yeah.
for him. I thought that was a winning strategy. I thought that's a great strategy for the GBA in general. That said, obviously it would appear that he's changing that up and trying to switch that and go more offensive. Um, and that's a great thing to do it with. Landorus Incarnate's one of the best offensive things to go. And considering Gubbs does have the first overall pick of the draft at this point, he can pair it with any offensive threat that's remaining in the pool.
Although I think we know what he wants to go with, but we'll save that for future date. But so on the other end, Tornadus Therian is not really a Pokemon that I myself am overly familiar with. Mostly the thing that I know most about it is that it has Regenerator, and people generally slap an AV on it, and that's
Yeah, you either run AV or you run like a Scarf or a U-turn or something like that. But AV is definitely taking a prominence this generation.
yeah.
Um,
I mean, I'd say that one thing that stands out when I first look at the team is that with Tornadus, however you want to say it, and Slowking, you have two regenerated Pokemon, which is always
yep.
useful.
And one of them is pretty significantly fast with U-turn. Pair that with Flygon if he does want to bring Flygon.
For,
He's got some nice momentum building opportunities there, and as we were talking about earlier, a significant enough wall core, that he could switch out into a lot of really safe, low damage taking resist. You know.
Agreed. And with the ability Regenerator, I think it almost kind of flip-flopped Gub's team to Joe's team because now I look at Joe's team and I think there's a lot of bulk there already before the draft.
Yeah, and nothing that's hitting extremely hard at this point.
Right.
Like realistically, Tornadus is the hardest hitting thing there. If you want to run special, then you're gonna have to rely on things like Hurricane to do your damage for you, which is not fun. And if you run physical, you're taking the big damage hit, running it on the lower stat side. But
Yeah, because I think offensively speaking, if I remember correctly, I think Tornadus Therian is like 100, 110, 121 as far as special attack speed goes, which
yeah,
is definitely potent offensively, but with the spread like that, you don't. It's kind of like we were talking about Cobalion the other day. It's almost middling and doesn't really hit really that overly hard. It's going to do damage. Don't get me wrong, but it's nothing like a
yeah. And while Regenerate is an amazing ability, especially on a thing with a good bit of natural bulk and the ability to throw an
true.
assault vest on it, he is going to be, losing out on just that power, which was very present from the sheer amount of kills that he got with Landorus I last
Yeah.
season. He's going to have to make that up elsewhere in the draft, which is interesting because a lot of the powerful things are still on teams. There's a couple of things in there, but Joe's also pretty low in the draft, so I don't know. I don't think this is a bad trade for Joe at all. I still think Joe's coming out ahead. I think his team's up there. Um, but I think this is a loss. I think it's a downgrade in a sense, unless he's really trying to reinvent his team. I think for Gubs, it's a total reinvention, but it's a plus. I think this is a traditional thing Gubs does now, which is hard to say because there's only been 2 seasons, so it's hard to really establish a pattern. But Gubs tends to draft things that are very good and then not get a lot of use out of them because they don't fit his team as well as he thought they would when he drafted them. And then he has to trade them off, which is, what we saw him do this season with Dragonite, which was the thing that sat on his bench most of the first season. And it's the thing we're seeing now in the off season with Tornadus, which it was a thing that sat on his bench for the most part throughout the season. He didn't get any use out of it. So he's trading it for Landorus, which hopefully he gets some use out of.
Yeah, I think if I'm looking at the stats correctly, I think Tornadus ended up 8-7, I believe, which is not great considering that there's potentially much higher hopes for that Pokemon. I mean, I think that, like you said before, with Joe's team, it has two quick, especially a Scarf Flygon, which nobody runs any other set but Scarf Flygon. Has
There are other sets.
I
What
there
I
there's
I'm
like
pretty sure Flygon only learns U-turn by level up.
I think there's like Scarf Flygon with Superpower and like Scarf Flygon with maybe Fire Punch, and I think those are like the two sets that you could potentially run. Maybe I don't really know.
Yeah, that sounds right.
But he has two really quick momentum Pokemon, and he has a great support Pokemon in Umbreon because that thing again just doesn't die. Uh, and now I'm jumping back to Heatran again because I drafted Heatran #1 overall, so I have much love for Heatran. But if you look at Slowking, that pairs extremely well with Heatran. So being able to U-turn into either one of those two Pokemon and really be able to not worry about whatever move they're going to try and go for is, I mean, a luxury that I'm sure Joe will exploit in the battles coming up.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be a thing that's going to work out well for him. Like I said, I do think Gubs comes out ahead on that part of the trade,
Oh, I agree.
whole-handedly. So I would say they're 1-1, which moves us down to the other 2-year trade, which is Heracross for Toxicroak. And very much again, this was the last-minute thing that was tacked on. The other parts were talked about and discussed, and then this was just kind of thrown on at the end. And to me, this is 100% again Gubs getting rid of deadweight. He made it pretty clear several times throughout the season, last season, that he was not happy with drafting Heracross. It just wasn't doing the work he needed it to do. He still has to have some sort of fighting presence. Fighting presence is pretty thin. Well, he does have the first draft pick, and there is still Terrakion floating in the free agency pool. Picking up Toxicroak is actually a pretty good pickup for him, especially considering he's in the conference with Kote and his Fearsome Rain team.
Yeah, and I think really that's what separates the fact that I think that the Toxicroak pickup for Gubs was more important than the Heracross pickup for Joe. I think Heracross can function very well in Joe's team. As we said before, he has a whole bunch of bulk and could potentially do the wear down, and then maybe has a Scarf Moxie Heracross that tries to come through and destroy the rest of everyone's face. But aside from that, I mean, he has Heracross itself already has good bulk. I mean, to fit in with the remainder of the team, but I don't see. I guess for me, usually I can see a team to say, okay, hey, they can maybe run it this way or that way, but I don't really see anything other than like a Scarf Moxie coming through for Heracross. Like that's the only thing that I can see that would work in Joe's team as it stands right now. Obviously, he has the potential to draft a whole bunch more Pokemon, but right now,
I mean, Joe did run Mega Heracross last year, which does work significantly different, but it does still have, the same general move coverage. So at least from that standpoint, he does know what he's
oh yeah,
working with, um, which is good, and that'll definitely help him out. I like I'm again, and I'm going to be biased here because Heracross is one of my favorite pokes. I like Heracross a bit more for Joe's team because I think it's a bit more straightforward and it hits harder than Toxicroak. Toxicroak is more about versatility and options, which seems funny because generally you just run one set, but you do have the option whether you're going to run a bulk up set or swords dance set or a special set with vacuum wave.
Yeah.
It's got some options in there and the ability to throw people off because they can run whatever they want to, regardless of what they do run. Um, but I think as we were talking about with Joe's team just getting substantially bulkier, I think just a thing that hits hard is what he needs. You
Yes.
know.
And Heracross can very much do that, especially something that has now +1 after a Moxie. I mean, nobody really wants to take a plus 1 Heracross close combat to the face. I mean, it's just you don't want to take that. But you were speaking on Toxicroak being very good for Gub's team because of the Premier Rain team in his conference, which that's really what tips it over the edge for me. Is it's not only it fits well with his team, but that in particular being able to play for potentially shutting down an opponent that you already know what their general strategy is really what kind of tips the favor for me over in Gub's section for that. I mean, also not to mention the fact as you touched on, it can really hit on either side. I mean, it learns Nasty Plot, it learns Swords Dance, it learns Bulk Up. It can run people have run an AV set with knockoff Sucker Punch and then potentially Dual Stab or Ice Punch. Or I mean, it learns a lot of moves, so it is very very versatile, which is the name of the game when it comes to GBA. Because if you're only doing one thing, then you're pretty easy to plan for week in week out. So
Yeah, unless it's something that does that one thing just the
true.
best of its league, that's the only real exception. You either need to be a specialist and the best at what you do, or a jack of all trades that can do a
True.
ton
I
of
mean,
different things.
and two Pokemon that kind of exemplify that would be Terrakion does its work and it does one thing and it does one thing well, and then you have something like Toxicroak or even an Arcanine where it can do just everything. And personally, I do love the fact that Toxicroak can do everything, and again that's why I just kind of think that that's maybe a little bit better on Gubbs' side to have that now, especially with his new identity of trying to be a little bit more offensive. So.
Yeah, the seeming identity, anyways. He's still trying to make some trades happen, even in addition to what he's already done. And, with three things left to go and a mega, obviously that's half the team. That's, half the team back up there. So he could just go bulk for those things and still be a bulky
That's
team by the end of it. Which, is not to say he doesn't still have bulk as is.
so. How would you rate each person's a grade on each person's side of the trade?
Um, I think Joe comes out better for this. I think Joe comes out significantly better for this. I think it's an A trade for him. Like I said, the only thing that I think is even a commentable downgrade would be Tornadus for Landorus, but I still think Joe's gonna do great work with Tornadus on the team he's built. I don't think there's very much Joe really can't get the most out of besides maybe Flygon, which just doesn't have a lot to offer. Um, so I mean, I give Joe an A on that one. For Gubs, I'm a little bit harsher because I don't I can see what he's doing, and I think Gubs got the trades he wanted. I don't think in any way was he screwed out of a deal or swindled by the silver tongue Flagalith. Uh, None of that happened. I think Gubs got what he wanted, and for that you have to respect it and give it a good score. But I just don't like the synergy going on with his team off the top of my head. Granted, he's got a lot of spots to fill, but that being said, I'm gonna give that like a B minus. He gets points because he accomplished what he wanted to. It's just not necessarily going to be palatable to everyone else, I think.
That's fair. That's fair. I mean, I'm right there just about with you. I'd give Gubbs a B on my side. One big drawback for me is that he traded away one of my favorite Pokemon in Heatran. But I think that as it stands right now, he with the draft he's got a lot of holes still to cover, as you said. So especially the whole Porygon, having Porygon and Snorlax on the same team, I still just I don't see it yet. I mean, I've been proven wrong multiple times before, but at the moment right now, I just don't see that yet. Maybe he's using Snorlax as a trade key for something in the future, or even Porygon 2 as a trade key for something else. I'm not really sure, but I give it a B right now because he did get two very versatile offensive threats in the trade, but I just think he sacrificed a lot in order to get those two. And then for Joe, I can give it an A minus. Again, I don't I don't really like Tornadus Therian just because I don't really use him that much, and I don't know how truly effective he can be. I think we still are waiting to see if that thing can actually put up numbers that we're kind of expecting it to do. I think Heracross is kind of a steal because I think people underrate how much damage Heracross can really do, and then obviously everyone knows how I feel about Heatran. It's just a great Pokemon all around. But so I think that he came out a little bit better, even though I guess when we were rating the individual part of the trades, we kind of gave Gubbs the advantage on 2/3 of it. But overall, I do think Joe came out a little bit better outside of the trades. I,
Yeah, I mean, I think just the Heatran pickup alone is huge.
yeah,
It's
I
huge.
mean, really, both of them put each other in the same position to have already a good bulky core going in to then just kind of fill roles of complementary players with the draft, especially Joe. I mean, with the grass, water, fire core being able to just kind of go out and be able to fill the other types that he really needs in his draft is very good for him. But I think that again, Joe's just in a better position to do that as opposed to what synergy is going on with Gubb's team at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a pretty fair consensus. This is a huge trade, though. This is massive. This is the biggest single trade in GBA history at this point. And it's definitely going to be interesting to see how these teams reinvent themselves in the coming up draft and then in the season itself once that gets started. So, yeah, I'm pretty psyched for it. I'm psyched there's still a lot of trade talk going on, more trades going on, one being voted on right now. So, expect to see more videos like this as things happen, more announcement videos. As always, thank you, Adam, coach of the Anaheim Mighty Ducklets. His link will be in the description, as well as the links for Joe Swagalift, the coach of the Pittsburg Steelix, and Gubbs Tacular, the coach of the Arizona D-eoxys.
Thank you guys very much. Definitely in the comment section, you guys did a good job on the last video letting us know how you felt about it and really what your opinions on those trades were. Definitely keep those up. We love to hear from you guys and hear what you guys really think about what's going on in the league because the interaction is probably one of the best parts of being in this league, really.
Yeah, it's great. Thank you guys so much. Thank you, Adam.
No problem.
See you guys next video.